Hello and welcome back to Podcasting is Praxis. I'm David, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm James, my pronouns are they and them.
I'm Jamie, he, him.
I'm Rob, also he, him.
And I'm Alistair, and another he and him.
Cool, we're all here. Yeah, okay, so...
Your diverse cast is here.
Yeah, we toyed with the lathe last week. We said a bunch of things about how nuclear war wouldn't happen, and we're still here, so...
Joke's on us?
Yeah,
take that as you will, yeah.
Yeah, damn us, essentially.
Yeah, sorry, we'll try harder this time. We won't really, though, because we're not going to talk too much about Russia and Ukraine, because, it's just all shit, and there's not really much to say. But we do have...
It is very funny that they keep getting all those generals killed, though.
That is funny, yeah. It's very much like, what if I was in charge? Like, it's fully got the energy of me playing Hearts of Iron. But, oh well. Anyway, I think we'll just fucking kick off and get straight into it, shall we? So we've got a few pieces of news first, and then we'll get on to the main topic.
Yeah, and then maybe treats after, if you're all good boys and girls, and other genders, whatever you like.
Smooth, Rob. Very smooth.
Good recovery there,
Yeah, absolutely stuck that landing.
Oh, yeah, fucking hell.
I feel seen and valid.
Hello, I'm James, and my pronouns are other.
Hello, I'm James, and my pronouns are other/misc asterisk. Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's not talk about the Ukraine war in and of itself.
Oh, that's going to annoy some people. The Ukraine. Oh, no.
Still don't care. But I wanted to I could be bothered to learn as to why that's a thing, but I promise you, dear listener, I'm not going to.
So how is life over in the Switzerland, Rob?
It's the fine. Now, I wanted to talk about some of the ancillary bonuses of the conflict. Mainly to do with commodity prices, which have been on an increasingly insane rate this year. So, we've already talked a little bit about the increases in natural gas prices, but I don't think that, a lot of people have quite worked out what the current conflict is doing to, not just gas, but the rest of the commodity markets. And we've already, before this conflict kicked off, there was already a lot of talk about inflation this year. But I think it's going to get essentially a whole lot worse. So, hooray. And I want to talk about that a little bit. There was a Resolution Foundation report called about their outlook for living standards. They expect 8% real inflation this year. So, I don't know how you're feeling about your job, but I'm pretty sure I'm not getting an 8% pay bump to compensate.
I've been told I'm getting a 6% bump. But no, this is the thing about working for socialists. They just give you shit like that. And that's great. So I'm still going to be losing even after a 6% bump.
That's shocking.
Wonderful.
I can't believe the Northern Independence Party would give you a below-inflation pay rise. Shocking.
I know, right?
6%. What I would fucking do for 6%.
Right, yeah.
What I would fucking do to get paid.
I mean, Jamie, this is literally what you do to get paid, so we know.
Well, not this episode isn't. Fucking freeloaders.
So Rob's had it out for non-binary people from Ukraine, and now our premium listener or non-premium listeners. Incredible.
Yes.
Someone had his fucking Cheerios today, definitely.
So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about some of the commodity swings we've been seeing. The first thing I want to talk about is wheat, because Russia and Ukraine combined are quite important when it comes to wheat. They export almost a third of the world's total supply, mainly through their Black Sea ports, but obviously those are not doing anything. And the spot prices for wheat, which is the stuff if you would buy it on the market today, right now, is already beyond what we saw in 2007, 2008, and 2009, 2010. And just as a brief reminder, in those periods, we had violent protests, food riots in more than 40 countries, and there's reasonable presupposition to say that the spike in 2009-10 helped lead to the Arab Spring because people were getting food insecure. So, good times ahead. It also means that specific...
So I was just going to say, I mean, the one, I maintain this is true, and it's the kind of truth that people don't want to see and acknowledge, but every major revolution has been preceded by a period of food insecurity, every single one.
Yeah,
every time.
Absolutely.
Name me one that hasn't, and I don't think you can, essentially. So expect to see some governments change over the next year or two.
Well, I mean, when gamers rose up,
Not
I don't
this one,
think there
though.
was a food shortage. Anyway, some countries more than others, and they make for interesting reading. There was a piece in the Financial Times, I think, yesterday. So Qatar, for example, is over 90% dependent on Russian wheat. North Korea, about the same. Tanzania, Rwanda, Azerbaijan, a whole bunch of others, over 80%. Turkey, which is already in a basket case economic situation of its own, imports 70% of its wheat from Russia, and the Ukraine supplies 90% of Lebanon, and also is a leading supplier for countries like Somalia, Syria, and Libya. So, already stable places in a good way that will now get more food insecure.
Yay.
So, and just as an FYI, this is just the opening shot. This is just, if Ukrainian farmers don't start, planting the summer crop soon, wheat prices globally could double or even triple, and food inflation is already at about 8%. So the current season is already pretty much fucked because nobody knows when to plant, when to harvest, when to put in fertilizer. And the US, Canada, and Argentina, who would normally pick up the slack, have had very bad harvests for different reasons. It's looking very good.
On the plus side, we'll just rename Shreddies to Freedom Squares or some shit, and it'll all be grand.
Yeah, we'll ban Putin because it sounds like Putin, and that'll make everything fine.
I can't believe they've actually done that.
They haven't banned it; they just renamed it.
Same thing.
Yeah, splitting hairs here, Jamie.
What did they rename?
Yeah,
they renamed it to
banned the concept of Putin.
They renamed it to cheesy chips with gravy. And Jamie Oliver's on his way to that guy's house with a fucking knife.
Oh, that fucking prick.
It is funny the massive change in class connotations of poutine versus cheesy chips and gravy, and Jamie Oliver getting very mad at it being displayed on a flat screen TV.
Yeah, me being a fucking, do you know what I mean? Just a fucking humble peasant and everything. I had no idea what the fuck poutine was. When I found out it was cheesy chips with gravy, I was like, what? Why is that this fucking, do you know what I mean? Why does that sound so fancy and elaborate?
But it's fancy because it's not cheese, it's cheese curds.
Exactly. It's separatist cheesy chips and gravy.
Quite literally. It's fancy because Quebec just,
it's only,
requires it to be so.
They're only cheese curds if they come from the Kurdistan region. Otherwise, it is just sparkling cheese.
While we're on the subject of Jamie Oliver as well, did everyone see that clip that went around Twitter of his lamb curry song from 2008 or whatever it was?
Yes, I seen the first 10 seconds of it and promptly stopped fucking watching. High cringe. No, I couldn't fucking cope with it.
I mean, the cringe was secondary to the racist accent. I felt like.
I don't know if it was secondary. I think it was kind of core to the cringe. Really, of all the racism that you could do, just that was fucking hell. I just did not enjoy a single second of it.
Truly lethal levels of cringe.
Apparently that song was really popular in Eastern Europe.
I can't believe it. I mean, these are the same fucking nutters that embrace David Hasselhoff as a legitimate artist, so...
Oh dear, fair enough.
You heard it here first. Rob is saying that Ukraine had it coming, so...
The Ukraine had it coming.
Just goddamn.
Yeah, okay, great. Enjoy clipping that in future, people.
Do you think we can solve this conflict by giving Putin control over the Ukraine, but sneakily the country's been renamed to Ukraine, and therefore it's all fine?
No,
I know,
we just.
what have they renamed it as Ukraine like a long time ago?
What if we just renamed the
that's
Ukraine to North Macedonia and then we give it to Putin? That's fine.
Oh, I see no problems with that plan whatsoever, Rob. See, that's it. He's cracked it, lads. End to racial and ethnic conflict in the region guaranteed.
Yeah, that's it. Welcome to all our friends in Greater Transnistria.
Oh man, it's going to be such a pain in the ass to get our KGB checks now, like because with all the banking disruptions. Anyway, briefly returning to the field of commodities because there's really good comedy fun to be had there. So apart from the gigantic spike in wheat prices, we are already past in terms of price the spike that we saw in the gas spot market as well, when it was about £450 per therm. We're now at about 540 per therm. So, like, we're well above that, about 20% over the top.
I'm gonna stop doing this fucking podcast if all it is just like, here, do you want some anxiety? Do you know what I mean? Like, can't we talk about something funny? We not got like some dipshit that's written an article about how like we should fucking.
I've got terrible news for you, Jamie. We've figured out how to monetize anxiety.
Yeah. Why can't we talk about like sorcerers that fucking want landlords renamed or whatever the fuck it was we did that time?
Don't worry, we do have an article and you will enjoy it.
Yes, exactly.
The command, you will enjoy it, citizen.
But yeah, and as we know, there's the price cap rises still coming in April, which I didn't know, by the way, but prepaying customers will get a higher price cap rise than, like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, because fuck the poor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They should just choose not to be poor.
And so far as I know, Labour's still sticking to that like 200 quid one-off bonus, and the Tories are still doing it the same, but there's no interest.
See, I reckon in a couple of years, Labour is just fully going to be the party of like rise and grind mentality. Do you know what I mean?
Are they not already?
Where it's like, oh, your heating bill's too high. But like, if someone offered me like a 50% reduction in my heating bills for the rest of my life, or a big jumper now, I would take the big jumper now, and here's why.
Labour first being superseded by Labour Sigma.
I mean, what can you say? Keir Starmer absolutely is a Sigma male.
Oh man!
Sigma
Speaking
balls.
of being a Sigma male, did you see? Because we are recording on International Women's Day, did you see the photos of him having a very casual reception with very casual businesswomen?
Oh, I think
It's
I've seen one of them.
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Keelsplain.jpg, yeah.
To also quite the audience.
I mean, like, if I was trying to fucking launder my reputation on International Women's Day by having a picture taken, it would be one where I was listening to the women and not talking at them.
Well,
like, it's very fucking easy.
Yeah, I mean, he's failed the Sigma mindset already if he's looked at a woman ever.
That's true.
Wait, how do you do it in Sigma mindset then? Do you just like stare at the floor and mutter until they sort of fall over you like in those old Lynx commercials?
No, it's meant to be men going their own way, kind of like, don't need no women. Don't need
Yeah,
no,
disregard women acquire currency, I believe, is the terminology used.
Yeah.
Loosely. It's more colourful than that, but
I
shan't sully International Women's Day by saying the actual thing.
Yeah, and to be totally honest, I mean, like, we know Kia has canonically looked at least 2 women, so, you know, with that in mind...
Tim Shipman, is that you?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Yeah, it would be good if every woman that Keir Starmer ends up looking at gets announced incidentally on a Sin and Cozy stream.
It would be, maybe they can all like be bounced into like slightly lesser positions in the Labour shadow cabinet if just the mere glance.
Oh, who knows? Who knows?
With
Anyway,
just
I
one
don't want to talk about Labour. Let's not talk about Labour today because I really can't.
All right, do you want to talk
you
more about
started it.
commodity prices? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we do.
No.
Anyway, so yeah, gas is already getting very fucking bad, and we talked about it before. Like 29 energy companies have already exploded in like the last year and a half, and I think there's going to be an interesting like new stretch of this. Is if the gas prices stay this high, as they probably will, because Russia started to threaten to cut off gas supplies to Europe and the UK as well. So like if that happens, it's going to get really interesting in a hurry. So like it's going to
serious question. Serious question. What are the odds of us having to go back to 3-day weeks?
Not high enough.
I would say they're not zero, but they're also, with the current Tories in charge, like will just make you work by like candlelight or in the dark or something. Like, you know, I do want to talk about the other thing because that is essentially very funny because like the oil price is rising as well, and that means apparently the Americans are now.
Oil's the same thing as gas, though. It's like fucking. Do you know what I mean?
No, but
just
oil
like
is
fucking,
just the thing.
This is just
Oil
like, oh
is
no,
just
we're not going to. I'm sorry, I'll stop talking about Lego all of the time. So anyway, and who's heard of Duplo?
As everyone knows, oil is just very sluggish gas. That's how it works.
Yeah. Only one of them upsets seabirds, so I'd like to hear about this.
Anyway,
Listen,
the thing I wanted to talk...
you don't want to talk about seabirds with gas, David.
The
Sorry,
thing I
Rob,
wanted to...
that wasn't worth it.
The thing I wanted to briefly mention is that the amazing thing right now is apparently because we need to not have Russian gas anymore, so the Americans are apparently like making friends again with the Venezuelans after cutting them off from the global market.
The irony is delicious.
Yes,
Now the turntables.
Also, like after years of embargoes and sanctions to like cripple the Venezuelan oil industry, this is another series of chickens coming home to roost because probably they can't even like turn the taps back on fully because the American like sanctions have like destroyed their infrastructure to such a huge degree.
I mean, would you sell it to the Americans anyway? Would you not just sell it to some fucking like some guy on like fucking YouTube that's going to drink it or something like that? You know what I mean? Like...
I mean, if I was in,
we will sell only to the LA Beast.
I mean, if I was Venezuela, I would be tempted to sell to America because what you then have is a situation where America can't fuck with you because essentially they're too dependent on your gas supply.
I think you just end up in a situation where like
for Saudi for how long?
You deliver you deliver them like 1 million barrels of oil, and then they fuck with you for a bit until they start like running out of oil, and then they pretend to be friends again.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that like United Fruit was already supplying the US with bananas before they went on. So
maybe actually,
Venezuela knows once the fucking like. Once their fishermen stop arresting like fucking jarheads on the beach, that America's about to start asking for fucking oil nicely again.
So yeah, I mean, let's not talk about essentially all the commodity prices are going insane. And while like I think it's kind of hard to draw like hard and firm conclusions about shit in a week because market reactions are a lot about psychology and magical thinking. But I think it is pretty clear that if the West, in its broadest meaning, wants to like decouple itself from Russia and its natural resources, it's going to be like one hell of a very long year in a lot of ways, and essentially none of them pleasant. Because like, if you decouple yourself from Russian oil, gas, nickel, gold, whatever, like you need to make up that backfall, like that shortfall, in other places, and none of those places are going to be having a good time either. Except when you're Venezuela, you get to fuck over the Americans.
On the front of fuel, okay, we do need like a constant supply of that. But like all the fucking like metals and shit, what we could do is we could just stop fucking buying and like releasing a new iPhone every fucking 20 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe
I've
don't
actually
fucking...
had a little check. No, I've had a little check, and apparently we can't do that.
Fuck yeah. Maybe we just go and dig up the fucking the Amazon landfill and just like use like a bunch of old tellies for a while.
Also, like part of the problem is, Jamie, so for rare earth magnets and things like that, you could arguably make that, that is a policy you could actually make happen. But things like lithium, we can't, because it's used in fucking everything these days.
Yeah.
So
great song as well.
Yeah.
I can't be running out of that.
But so like that's the bigger problem. It's lithium, I think, from
and
what
nickel,
I understand, and
specifically.
And nickel actually. Good shout, Rob. So unfortunately, there's just no way around that. That's just a reality we have to live with.
Yeah.
So like I think it's kind of hard to draw like hard or firm conclusions because market reactions and markets in general are mostly psychology and partly just wizardry. But I do think that it's clear that like if the West, in its broadest sense, wants to like decouple itself from Russia and the vast amount of natural resources it has, we are going to be having like a hell of a year in a lot of ways, like none of them pleasant, especially if this state of being is like permanent. And I think I mentioned it before, but like the Resolution Foundation report projects like 2.5 years of falling real wages in the next couple of years. And I think if you're on benefit, you're essentially completely fucked, because this Tory government is not going to bump like 8% benefits just to keep up with inflation.
I mean,
like that's just
to be fair,
not
Rob,
happening.
To be fair, Rob, a Labour government wouldn't do that either. So
that's true.
Just to put that to rest.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I think unless we talked a lot about central banking and stuff on previous episodes, but like unless Rishi Sunak and the Bank of England essentially keep the money printer going, it's I think going to get really very turbo fucked. And if you were wondering, because I read his May's business school speech, because you know I'm just cool like that. He's out there saying that it is the free responsibility of the individual to organize him or herself. And that is the morally right way to organize the economy. And government borrowing and spending is essentially bad because it makes markets less free. So, you know, good times are had by people of the Thatcherite persuasion, especially in the middle of a crisis.
I honestly think ideology is going to get us all immiserated and killed the way this is going, frankly.
But
because there is only one appropriate response to all of this situation.
Is that to do a no-fly zone over Ukraine?
Well, see, this is a problem, right? Because on one hand,
you've changed your fucking tune.
on one hand, you've got the fucking, free market fundamentalist bullshit, and then on the other hand, you've got yes, well, clearly what the world needs here is nuclear Armageddon. That's our political discourse right now, essentially. Those are the only things they've got in the shed. And
well, if I had to choose,
you sadists.
If I had to choose, it would be option B.
Yes, join us for a special pod weekend retreat as we camp around Faslane together. Anyway, shall we move on to the next thing, Alistair?
Yes.
Please, God, yes.
So, our next topic comes more from the UCU strikes field of events. So, at Bristol Uni, sometime last week, 12 students occupied a university building, the Wills Memorial Tower in Bristol, in solidarity with striking UCU workers. The conditions of people who work in academia are, as we've said before, fucking dog shit, and are rightfully striking to try and prevent yet more back slippage on pensions. Is a specific issue. I think it's at the forefront for the moment.
Pensions one, this.
Yeah. So over the last week, the university and the occupying students had productive meetings to agree to come to terms on the occupation being stopped. So, and on Saturday, an agreement appeared to be reached. I'm quoting from the tab here, which is where this story comes from. So, no disciplinary action for unauthorized occupation of the university premises, as long as it's peaceful. Next point, university management would clarify the terms under which action short of strike would result in pay cuts, and university management would spread strike day pay losses over a maximum of 5 days per month for current and future UCU industrial action this year.
Okay, cool. That's
very little, but it's something.
It's which is pretty much what the occupiers said.
I mean, like, I don't know if it's Bristol Uni, but I did see a tweet from someone who mentioned that their uni, like I say, I can't remember if it was Bristol or not, but they were basically refusing to make payment of wages until like all work had been caught up on.
Oh, fuck off.
Which is highly illegal.
Yep.
In the most Dave Courtney voice you got.
Yeah. If you, the listener, playing at home, you can just do that voice in your head, because none of us are any good at voices.
Yeah.
Except for me, I'm great at them.
Very true.
So yeah, the students occupying the building, they described these concessions as minimal, but they agreed to leave while the concessions they'd be implemented. And so I'm going to quote again from the tab here. So rather than receive confirmation, however, instead the occupiers woke up to an email accusing them of, quote, arguably violent acts, end quote, when they entered the building last Monday, and the university would be, again, quote again, rescinding all concessions, end quote. In a statement, the students said the claim had not been substantiated with any evidence.
Oh, okay, but I mean, the vice chancellor of a university wouldn't lie. I mean, that'd be weird.
No.
All I've ever known a university chancellor to be is an honest broker. So it goes on. Occupiers took care to be conscientious and non-violent, talking to the estates team upon entry and informing them calmly and peacefully of our exact actions. Estate and cleaning staff were informed that they could leave the building at any point and were advised on how to do so. When the Great Hall was occupied, no staff were inside. No occupiers have any recollection of violent acts, nor any threats of such behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, to the listeners at home, if you're going to be occupying a building during a strike, like, be nice to the fucking janitor, because it's not their fault, and they're probably just as exploited as you, just as an FYI.
Yeah.
So, and there was apparently one member of the cleaning staff who felt distress, and the occupiers sent an apology to university management that was then going to be passed on to the affected member of staff, which is, it's all very reasonable. This person was distressed, and they apologised for the distress they caused.
Yeah, fair dues.
However, what was the chief complaint of management, do you think?
The students...
They made a mess.
The students occupying looked scruffy. They were not wearing blazers and boaters.
Not quite, but you're on the right path, Rob.
I'm going to guess that they created unhygienic conditions by not allowing the cleaning staff to do their work.
Jamie, any guesses?
I don't know. You know what I mean?
Well,
I can't fucking tell you how management thinks.
well, Rob was the closest, except it wasn't bow ties and blazers that were scruffy. It was balaclavas that they wore initially when they took over the building. When they told the staff what they were going to do, and that they recommended the staff leave. So, yeah, that was the chief issue that the university management had with the occupiers.
You stand accused of upping the Ra. Is that it?
No, well, they couldn't accuse them of that because they couldn't do the little dub over when they were speaking to them face to face. So how do you know it's the IRA then? So,
deal.
Billy, who I assume is an anonymized version of this person's name. So Billy, who's a member, like I say, member of the occupiers, stressed that while individual members of security have acted inappropriately, the occupiers want to direct their anger at university management, who they believe, by reneging on the agreement, have shown a lack of compassion and makes clear the university's union-busting intentions.
Just like to point out, by the way, it's very unlikely that someone called Billy would be done for upping the Ra.
Do you want to hear an extremely annoying spokesperson for Bristol Uni and what they're
always?
Boy, do I ever! I can't wait.
So this is a quote again from the tab. This is all of what was published in the tab from this spokesperson. We appreciate that the occupation was in solidarity with staff taking industrial action. Fine. However, we cannot condone this being wearing balaclavas, and will now follow our usual processes where unacceptable behaviour is reported. In terms of their demands, we have been able to explain that we have previously communicated to staff that deductions will be taken from across multiple payslips. This has always been our approach.
Alright, so the rest is just them denying ever making any agreement with the students occupying the building.
Mm-hmm. This has always been our approach. This will be taken from March and April's pay, and staff have been made aware of this.
So, I mean, going back to my earlier point, had they worn little straw hats and blazers, it would have been fine.
Yeah, so they were occupying. Yes, they were occupying the building in a scruffy manner, which cannot be abided.
They should all wear Treefax the Reaper outfits for the next strike. That'd be fucking amazing. Nobody's going to complain that that's like a sad thing, like, that made them feel terrified. Imagine how much fun it would be if, 12 gigantic blow-up Christmas trees ran into your building and said, "This is now occupied." You'd be like, "That sounds amazing,
in fairness,
Santa."
It would be very
terrified.
hard for the Vice Chancellor to complain when they're on a respirator, though. So.
Yeah, I would be terrified of Treefrax the Reaper and his kin coming for me, frankly.
So there's an updated statement from this same spokesperson who said, contrary to statements from the occupiers, the university remains committed to not taking action in relation to peaceful protests. So don't worry, guys, we're not going to do anything that you want us to do.
Wait,
Excellent.
contrary to the statements from the occupiers, so them saying they're screwing us over.
I assume this is to do with the disciplinary action side of things, but they've already said, like, I mean, it's the usual doublespeak shit. Like, oh yeah, we won't do anything if it's peaceful protest, but they've already accused them of not peacefully protesting by causing
wearing
distress.
through the medium of up the Ra, wearing a balaclava. Okay, just so as I understand that the freedom of expression is being upheld, except for their choice of hat wear. Okay,
protest is peaceful unless you cannot be easily identified, in which case you immediately become a massive threat.
Okay. All right. Cool. Just double checking that I'm fully informed. And all right. So next week we will do we or do we not record with a balaclava on?
I mean, I've been recording with balaclava since day one. Was I not meant to be doing this?
Oh, I've been doing this fully naked. There's nobody else doing that.
Absolutely not.
Do we need to settle on like some compromise position where it's like we wear the balaclava and nothing else? Is that what we're basically getting to?
It's the only thing that gets me in the mood, to be honest.
Oh dear.
All right. So
there's a little bit more about how we will always support right members to work in a safe and caring environment. Receive additional information that suggests there may have been unacceptable behaviour if further action is required. Position on spreading strike reductions across 2 months has always been their approach. So
we are small beans. Please listen to us and not the scary strikers wearing the face masks. Yeah, cool. Very normal. Very fucking typical. Fuck them and up the workers, up the strikers.
Yeah,
up the occupiers.
Massive solidarity with the occupying students, and stay in that building as long as you fucking have to get your concessions.
Yeah, up the students, up the staff, and apparently up the Ra as well if they're wearing balaclavas, right?
Everything's going up on today's podcast. Everything.
Who else is on the up and up?
If these trends continue, I have a compromise maybe on the pod. Where we all do wear balaclavas, but then to make sure that we don't fall afoul of the centrist mob running Twitter these days, we do all wear army jackets with sonnenrads on them and then naked from the waist down. I think that's probably the most appropriate outfit for.
And if you're not happy, sonnenrads for some, Ukrainian flags for others.
The Ukraine flags for even others.
Oh dear. Right. Okay. What else have we got, Alistair?
So this is probably one of the bigger nuggets that we've had is the John Bercow's the inquiry.
Nugget is a good word, yeah.
Oh, that one's for our Scottish listeners. Enjoy.
That one clearly sailed straight over my head, so I'm just going to persevere. So there was recently an independent inquiry into numerous allegations of bullying on the part of John Bercow while he was formerly Speaker of the House of Commons. So there were. Well, I don't really think we need to go too much into the specific details of what he's alleged to have done and when it happened and all that stuff. The main
this is a very, very long running story. Like this, I remember this from when he was Speaker. Like that, this was a very long running story, but everybody just wanted to ignore it because he shouted "Order" at like Brexit people or something.
Yeah, I mean, so. The headlines of this inquiry's findings are there were, out of 35 complaints that were made, 21 were upheld. There was a recommendation that if Bercow was still a member of the House, the inquiry would have recommended his like formal expulsion, which, by the way, almost has never happened. It's happened like less than half a dozen times. Usually an MP will either resign in shame or will be like manoeuvred out of the House of Commons through some other means. And they also recommended that he never be given a pass to a formal pass to the House of Commons. But he can still
So he
enter
can't become a
and
lobbyist, essentially. Oh no.
yeah, essentially.
Raspberries.
And yeah,
So, hang on, right? So, my thing is, I'm a little skeptical about this whole thing. What I know we said you didn't want to get deep into it, but what is it they allege that he actually did, and who was investigating him specifically?
It's the House of Commons Standards Committee.
Yes,
Right.
it was the House of Commons Standards Committee, and there were allegations made by. So the allegations were brought by Lord Lisvane, former clerk of the Commons, and private secretaries Kate Ems and Angus Sinclair. And so an example of some of his behaviour was, screaming at clerks in the House, and at one point, I believe, throwing a phone at a wall or something to that effect.
Okay.
Yeah, so quite, scary stuff, particularly if you're a junior worker in the House of Commons.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's not the sort of stuff that you can really kind of fake, basically.
No.
So
Yeah.
sure.
So obviously the findings go beyond scathing, but to me at least, I do find it a bit amusing that these inquiries can have teeth when they are inclined to, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not to say that MPs aren't regularly up to their necks in it, but rarely does something come out that nails an MP to the wall in quite a fast enough and exact enough level of detail that they're recommended to have been expelled.
Well, I mean, it's not quite fast enough because he's already out, isn't he? Like, he's done.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
essentially. But what I mean is, in terms of the findings being so immediate that the ramifications would have been expulsion. The last of which was in the 1950s.
I mean, but on the other hand, I also think that this whole thing wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been the sort of anti-Brexit guy. With the current Tory majority, they would have just shuffled this under the rug if he'd been if he towed the line more in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it's so Bercow himself has essentially fought this. It sounds to me like he's fought this inquiry every step of the way. Which the inquiry itself has dismissed, essentially more or less out of hand the Bercow's comments on the inquiry itself, and by the sounds of it, rightfully so. I mean, yeah. So this is kind of exactly it. I mean, you look at the allegations and investigation into Priti Patel, which by the sounds of it were the same sort of category of severity and reprehensibility as what Bercow is alleged to, found to have done after this inquiry. But because Patel is obviously a useful ally of Johnson, as well as a dove of the most right-wing parts of our press, all it takes for her to essentially suffer minimal to no ramifications is for Johnson to come out in support of her. And... the inquiry is entirely defanged. So it's and it seems to me it's quite similar in comparison to things like the expenses scandal. It's not so much a shocking revelation of a rare and unexpected breaking of the House rules and norms, but it's a glimpse behind the curtain of the reality of what it is to be in the House of Commons. And this is by no means unique to just the Tories. I mean, we've had Neil Coyle recently suspended for allegations of intense racism to who I believe was if not a junior journalist, then a journalist I hadn't heard of prior.
I was a journalist, yeah.
Well, I think Alistair, you're kind of hitting the nail on the head here, because my initial assumption when I heard about this inquiry was, I think they're probably getting, they're being punitive against him because he was a real pain during the Brexit kind of stuff, right? Was my initial kind of take on it. And it turns out actually he has done some horrible shit, but I think Thesis, he probably is being targeted because of the Brexit stuff. Antithesis, actually he has done some terrible shit. Synthesis, they do terrible shit, but if you're on the right team, it gets swept under the rug. And what's happened is the law is being, standards are being selectively enforced. against people who are politically inconvenient.
Yeah, I mean, so
And
essentially,
pretty fucked up.
Yeah, so essentially, this stuff is, like I say, is happening all the time, but it's only when it's politically expedient, or more rarely, when there is a significant enough rupture that business as usual in Parliament is like completely disrupted. And therefore the propaganda arms of the state, your BBCs, and maybe your even
and
more
the
tame
Guardian.
like Telegraphs, etc., are allowed, or in the case of a particularly big rupture, forced to announce this stuff to the public, which is what we found with the whole second jobs and expenses scandals and Partygate shit. This stuff is happening all the time, and that's kind of what I thought this story why it was interesting, because it's like this is what you don't see. This is really what you don't, especially what obviously MPs don't want you to see. And this level of toxicity is like, this is base level. This is how it works in Parliament. Like, rooting bullying out of Parliament, plus all the other horrendous shit that happens there behind closed doors, and sometimes even out in the open, is fundamentally never going to be tackled by the only actual authority that can deal with it, which is the party of government. At least, at the very least, Labour and the Tories, and I'm not so much aware of the goings-on behind like nothing parties like the Lib Dems and Greens, etc. They run.
I mean, let's be real. The Greens have one MP.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, like, it's...
well, you're basically saying, what is Caroline Lucas secretly up to?
Yeah, it's not.
Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. And and the major parties at least run on bullying and shithousery, and this sort of ties into the Corbyn years and what we've seen since then. And so it's doubtful, and particularly for a given faction within such a party that has managed to bully and bulldoze and backstab their way to office, ever going to do away with the tools that they use to achieve that success. Frankly.
Yeah. No, because they need that type of, if you want to keep these people in line, you need, what tools do you have left? If you, let's take an example,
it's the only tool that the Labour right have, and it is what they're going to, it is the hammer that they've got to apply to every nail of political issue that comes before them.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, because, if you, the Tories, at least, they're not better, but at least they have, a carrot and a stick, whereas the Labour has just as a stick, whereas the Tories, at least, you might be badly behaved, but they can always be look, how about we build a new, whatever, library or community centre, or, we put, more money into your pet projects or your constituency, right?
Yeah,
well, at least with the Tories, you get pork barrel politics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Tories have something to buy
one of the ways. Yeah, one of the ways that you can say that's definitely true with Labour as well is look at, and I hate to do this, but look at the thick of it. It's specifically modelled on the concept of a Labour government, and why was the only reason that Labour government was remotely fucking effective? It was because Malcolm Tucker was there to just bully people into doing things. That's the only reason anything ever seemed to fucking happen.
Yeah, I mean, we think about who has been, reformed in the public imagination, and it's people like Alistair Campbell. If anything, Malcolm Tucker is less than the real deal, diluted Campbell by the sounds of it.
Sort of, so I've got a bit of experience background in this. I've touched on this world close enough to be able to tell you that the thick of it might as well have been a documentary in many ways, because, the honest truth of it is that the majority of MPs, etc., are just kind of thick. They're just kind of dumb. They're not actually, they are good at giving a speech. And that basically, that right there, good at giving a speech and emoting, are basically the only real requirements. And that, again, depending on the party, that's not even necessarily a requirement, to be totally honest. If you're part of a big machine party and you get put in a safe seat, it doesn't matter.
Oh, Putin in a safe seat. Fuck.
Yeah, right, okay. But, and so in practice, what actually runs government is you've got the civil service, who, they basically do, the permanent undersecretaries basically do most of the actual work. They actually run the state the ship of state. And then the other people that run it are essentially the special advisors of whatever form that are brought in. And then those rare politicians who actually have some like material competence and and in practice political ability. Because here's the thing, right? Actually being good at politics is not required to be an MP.
No, absolutely not.
It's really not.
There's an entire machine there to do that for you.
Yeah, essentially. Like, if you're actually able to play politics, you might do quite well, or you might do quite badly. And when we put all this together, the odds of getting someone through who is, in order, politically capable, like can actually play politics with people and do that thing and do it well, who is able to give good speeches and emote and actually connect with the public, and who is also professionally competent, like they're intelligent and capable and can make, sound decisions. It's quite rare for them to line up. And so what you get in practice is you have a relatively small coterie of people who are actually directing the overall structure of the political party and its government, if you will. And the problem is, under the system, they nominally have equal power with all the other people in their party. And so in practice, they need to cajole, bully, and do other things to get them to go along, essentially. Because they're not actually based in movement politics or anything. There's not actually any kind of cohesive thing that keeps them all on side. And in many ways, the system of kind of liberal democracy, of electoralism, is designed to get MPs to think and feel they're special, so they can be co-opted and can be turned against any party which is potentially problematic. Like, there's this whole idea that somehow MPs are exceptional because they've been run through the electoral system, and they're absolutely not in the slightest.
Looking at you, Mike Gates.
Yeah, exactly. But they are actively encouraged to believe that they are, and we're encouraged to believe that they are, because that makes them ripe for co-option by private interest. And so you put all this together, and in systems that lack like an actual movement-based politics, the only other alternative is this kind of bullying, cajoling kind of bullshit. And so this is why the whips exist, and this is why, if you are to believe the rumours, there are registers in every party containing all the crimes, misdeeds, and embarrassing facts of every
register.
MP.
Oh, wait, no, sorry.
Well,
I mean, if you go by that fucking leaked little screenshot of a spreadsheet from the Tories, I believe, back when Theresa May was PM, like there's some definite sex.
There's some wrong cops in there.
Stuff at the very least, kind of mentioned in that.
If that was real, and certainly we can't talk anything about contemporary politicians, but we do know that, for example, Cyril Smith and others had proclivities which were actively covered up.
Yes.
So yeah, like this is the kind of reality of it. The coercion and control is necessary to steer this shambling electoral mess towards any kind of reasonable outcome. And that's why you end up with, when the system breaks, you get people like, who's the name of the Tory former whip who has a fucking tarantula called
Gavin Williamson.
Gavin Williamson.
Yeah, Gavin Williamson.
Cronus, my bestest buddy.
He basically got himself in a position where he could control the register, and has clearly used that to parlay himself into a political prominence, which isn't really meant to happen.
Until his little fucking house of cards fell down and he was spotted crying on the phone to his mum that he'd lost his position as education.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because that can only carry you so far, and once you pull that trick, people will maneuver to expel you. Because the whole system basically works. Like, the way it works is like they've all got knives pointed at each other's throats, which are normally refereed by the whips. And so the idea is, as long as you're in the party, then it's fine.
Yeah.
And this is why, by extension, by the way, the journalist class all ignore this shit, because this is business as usual, and it probably applies to them too.
And
it's not even that it just applies to them, it's that it's useful to them as well, because if they know some of this stuff and don't report on it, then they can see the manoeuvrings that are occurring around them, which makes for longer-term stories and longer-term communication and ways of access.
And the long and short of it is, it's a giant club, and you're not in it, and you're not in it because of accidents of birth.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Okay, well, let's wrap that bit up there, and let's talk about another facet of British society, which is respecting the military.
Don't we just love the British state, folks?
We do.
Favourite thing.
We do.
I have a patriotic erection right now.
Fantastic. Good. Well, this is something we've been wanting to kind of talk about for a while. It's been on the back burner for ages, and figured, fuck it, why not? It's War Christmas all the time anyway, it might as well be, so let's just have this chat now. I know we have kind of talked about War Christmas, etc. a little bit before, way back then, as we've spoken about the clown shoes of respect, etc. And that's kind of, some of that stuff is kind of what I want to touch on. But generally, just this is going to be just a chat about the weird conception of what the military is in the mind of the British public. I'm not going to focus too much on the military side of it because I don't really care. It's weirder and more interesting what the public think of the military in Britain, because it's a very strange relationship. Basically, as far as the public's concerned, the army is everything to them, and I'll cover exactly what I mean by everything in a little bit. But if you ask any liberal, they'll say that there's not a thing that the army couldn't do as good as or better than pretty much anybody else.
Yeah, we've established that if there's a problem, you get some stout lads in to yeet it. And that's how it works. And that's the military, if nothing else, are stout lads who are qualified in yeeting.
Yeah. So what I've done is, this was very difficult to do any research on, because funnily enough, not many people survey the attitude towards the military because it's kind of a given. Like, it's just assumed that everyone loves them and they're perfect. So the best I could find was a set of surveys that were done in 2012. You know, a fine vintage year for liberalism, and some of the stats I've got here are quite interesting. So people were asked about their respect for the armed forces and other professions.
Maximal, just endless. I don't know how I could respect it more.
Yeah, well, just a picture the voice from Crisis going maximum respect. And that's like the British default.
Yeah. So, of the armed forces, 75% of respondents had a great deal of respect. 20% had some respect. 2% had not a lot. And asterisk had, none at all.
Asterisk.
Yes.
How dare you, asterisk?
It has not even given me a figure, presumably because it's impossible to have none at all respect for the military. That's fair enough. That kind of seems about right. You would maybe expect that from the British public. The same question was asked about doctors. Only 63 compared to 75% had a great deal of respect. 33% had some, 2% not a lot, and asterisk shows up yet again for none at all.
Do you know what I think partly that is?
Yes, go for it.
The same guy.
Is it vaccines?
What? No. I think it's just contact. Most people don't have contact with the military.
That's definitely a part of it. Now, of the police, 48% had a great deal of respect, and 41% had some respect. A slightly more respectable 7% had not a lot, and 2% had none at all, which, okay.
We've got them all on the show tonight.
And yeah, and they're here tonight. And the lawyers, 12% a great deal of respect, 50% some respect, because obviously it's a well-to-do job, etc. You've got to study hard for it. 25% had not a lot, and 7% had none at all. So, far and away, the armed forces are leading that with the amount of respect given to them.
The amount of
let's
respect.
have a look into why. Yeah.
Come join the military where we'll pay you in respect.
The troop respecter has formed a nation.
83% of people in this specific study of the armed forces were asked, what's your opinion? And they had a high or very high opinion of it. And this is kind of taken in the shadow of Afghanistan, and Iraq had not long since finished. We were 3 years out of Iraq at this point. So
so this was the high respect zone after we got our asses handed to us in the UK,
yep.
in Afghanistan.
This is 2012. So we're still getting our ass handed to us in Afghanistan, and we've finished with Iraq. We pulled out 3 years before this. 58% of people polled said it was wrong to go to Iraq. Now, of that same amount of people, 94% declared their support for armed service personnel who had recently served in Iraq and Afghanistan. So 94% of Iraq, specifically 91% in Afghanistan.
Jesus Christ.
pretty fucking desperate there. Yeah. We didn't like them being there, but we loved the job they did when they were there. Like, cognitive dissonance. Yay. So that's
Well, yeah, because
all
them
very
being
fucking-
there is the fault of like fucking like all the leaders. But you know what I mean? They're there because they'll do their duty no matter what, and you've got to respect that.
I love people who just follow orders.
Yeah. Famously, never been problems with that before. Now, before we go on any further, like, if I reference anything past this point, to do with like military experience or whatever, or more importantly, if anyone else says that I have military experience, I do not. I have experience of the military. It's a very important fucking distinction. So, for anyone who hasn't listened before, I used to be in the cadets, both as a cadet and then as an instructor for quite a while after that. That is the full extent of my experience. I've never been in the army, I've never been in a fucking TA or any shit like that. But in those positions, I have spent a lot of time with people who were regular soldiers or also reservists or had extended family, which I think is going to be the kind of key group that we're probably going to look at here, who are or were in the army. So, like, that is going to maybe come up a bit later on with perspectives, etc., etc. But we'll get there. What is the army?
Miserable pile of secrets.
Correct.
A machine
The
that
army
cannot
is-
wait to vibrate you.
Yeah, no, it's fed into the machine that vibrates. No, the army is the ultimate force. It's the be all and end all. It can do whatever the fuck it wants because it can do it all so well. So I've got some examples of the army being fantastic and great at everything it does. Very recently, now I think still at this point, you had the military supporting the NHS directly because we were running out of people to staff the hospitals because of COVID.
Did they now also build
As
like
of-
those Nightingale hospitals that then ended up not being used by
They-
anybody and we just tore
Yes,
them down 5 minutes
yes.
after? All right, cool.
They were involved in the logistics of setting them up and then did fuck all to staff them. But like, there are reasons for that. The reasons for that being we have a fairly small army, and like a very small amount of that is actually doctors, etc.
Yeah, I was going to say a crucial misunderstanding of what a bed in a hospital actually pertains to. It's not just the fucking physical bed. Also, turns out there are people that work in hospitals. Like, they keep causing like problems by not being enough and wanting money and shit. So
Yeah, that's it. Unfortunately, when you write bed 1 on a 1033 form, the storeman will give you bed 1 and no other accoutrements with it. The military was, as of the 31st of January this year, so like just over a month ago, still giving 1,500 plus members of military personnel to the NHS to support them. That was like right across the country. So like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it doesn't take a lot to make a bit of a difference on a shift sometimes. Because if you think about how staffed is a ward that's going to be dealing with like COVID stuff, it's not actually that highly staffed. Largely because of the amount of fucking cutbacks, etc., etc. But it's not going to be like absolutely fucking hoaching with people. There'll be enough people there to do the job on a normal day, as opposed to what COVID's thrown at us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a bad thing. The army being stepped in to do that.
Well, I mean,
that's
it
fine.
is very bad. It should just be done by civilians who should be paid. But
Well,
you know.
it should be. It should be. Yeah. Oh, don't get me wrong. They'll be getting paid for it, but like, yeah, it's still not fucking great. And like, what rate of pay they're on? Don't ask that question. Next thing I thought of as an example of it is as scabs. We love to use the army as
scabs of last
scabs.
resort.
Yes, well, yes, fully. This one's kind of a mixed bag because specifically I'm talking about firefighting here. I don't really know of instances where the army's been called in to do stuff for like any other real role. But the firefighter word kind of stuck out to me. So, does anyone remember the Green Goddesses?
Yes.
I
Yes.
have no idea
Weird
what that
fucking
is.
thing. You don't know, right? The Green Goddesses are like not fire engines. It's very important that we say they are not fire engines. They're like self-propelled pumps, I think is the correct term for them.
I love to
Big
jump
fuck-
on a big fire hose and just ride it like a cowboy.
It's just a big fuck off lorry. It's more of a van. It's a big van, and like it's got pump mechanism in it, and then it can pump from
What?
local resource, etc. Yeah,
I'm
it's a replacement
so
fire
confused.
engine.
The army is really missing a fucking trick by just sticking one of those pumps in a tank and then just pointing the barrel at burning buildings.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that. So, like, yeah, it's basically just a big fucking water pump on wheels. That's all it really is. You need to plug it into a source, and then it does stuff.
Super soaker for adults.
They were actually, yeah, they were quite useful initially. So they were initially brought in as the auxiliary fire service, and that was way back during the early days of the Cold War. The idea was that they would be used as part of like civil contingencies and stuff in the event of nuclear war. They were first used, I believe. I don't know about first, but they were definitely notably used during the Winter of Discontent, when basically every public service said, "Get fucked, we're not doing it anymore." So that's the firefighters were brought in. The army was brought in to replace the firefighters then, and this kind of continued on and off until 2004. Now, bear in mind, like, the auxiliary fire service was shut down by Harold Wilson in the 60s. This equipment was still there and still in use by the army in 2000, up until like the early 2000s. 2001, 2002, there were notable fire strikes where these engines were deployed. Tony Blair didn't like that, so passed some legislation to ensure that firefighters had to give over their own equipment to the army if the army had to step in to cover a strike, thereby defanging the ability to have a strike.
Love to have a Labour government supporting the rights of workers to strike.
Yeah, so they were used up in the last instance, like I said, was 2002 that I could find, and we sold off the last 40 of these engines in 2005. So there's that. They have been recently used for some good as well. I don't know if anyone remembers the big fire in the moors near Manchester back in 2018, the Saddleworth Moor. Massive fuck off set of fires there. The army was sent in to assist with that. Not in those engines, obviously, though. They were using like Chinooks to do water drops and shit like that. And
I've got to say, part of my mind is just incapable of separating the concept of the army trying to deal with a fire by just like firing bullets into it, like American cops.
Yeah,
well, no,
it comes from fighting the fire.
It's fine, Alistair. They use the CIA ice bullets, and that works.
So, they are also fairly regularly deployed whenever there's flooding. Any sort of big flooding that starts to affect like towns, villages, etc. The army tends to be deployed, and they are quite good in that because, like,
they're way around the sandbag.
I was going to say, yeah, they've got all the sandbags, haven't they?
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's literally it's about heating things at water. So, like, I'm not surprised that works.
Exactly, that's it. I mean, it's engineering, and the army does actually tend to be quite good with engineering. They spend a lot of their money and training time just fucking about with engineering tasks. They love that shit, so they're quite good at that. So
you can't just play space engineers like a normal person.
Yeah, I mean, arguably this creates some kind of like good argument for the continued existence of the army in some form, like disaster relief, that type of stuff. It's good to have something like that that's effective and can be deployed wherever it needs to be deployed. That's good. But you'll notice a little pattern forming here. We've covered ambulances. We've covered fire engines. What's the next thing?
Bob the Builder.
No, not the Coast Guard. That's the Navy's job.
Finally, we have realised the true strength of the cop, the military.
Yeah. So I can't think of any examples where the army has been used to replace the cops, because the cops don't ever do anything good, like go on strike and stop being cops, etc. So
they can't do that. That's illegal.
Well, exactly.
I can't wait to get my army crime number for insurance purposes.
So what I've got is a little sampling of tweets from during the London riots.
Oh boy! What wonderful time to be online.
Wait. Let me put on my wizard prognosticator hat. Are we about to hear from Caitlin Moran?
We are. Would it be so bad if the army rocked up now, Caitlin Moran?
There we go.
We've got. Let's see
this was blue tick fucking like heaven, wasn't it?
Christmas.
They all just
Yeah,
had
very.
like such a massive fucking hard on for the army turning up and brutalizing people.
Oh yeah, 100%. So I've actually got quite a few blue ticks, none of which actually are notable as far as I'm aware of them. But I will just give you what they do and the tweet. So we have here, send in the army, send in the water cannons, stop fucking around, from a DJ. We
Which
have
DJ?
A DJ.
Doc Scott.
Never heard of the cunt.
Never heard of the
No,
prick.
yeah, this is what I'm saying. I haven't heard any of these cunts either.
I'm going to assume that guy has like a show on BBC Radio now.
I don't know. We've got BBC Politics account. UKIP leader Nigel Farage MEP has called for the government to send in the army to quell the riots in London
No,
and
that
other
doesn't
cities.
sound like my boy.
No, I know, it's mad.
What's he doing in there? Sending the guns? No.
We have got who the fuck is this cunt? Hang on, he's moved to another.
Every day I
account and
scroll
he's
through
protected.
Twitter.com, another blue tick. Who the fuck is this gun?
Literally don't know who this fucking guy is, but he's got a blue tick. Hard-working people trying to run businesses. Time to send in the army and kick the crap out of these unemployable teenagers.
What was the name?
Unemployable. Oof.
That was Steve Brookstein.
That rings a
don't
vague
know.
bell.
I don't know who the fuck it is. Now for now a Sky, I don't know if he was then, but he's now a Sky News political correspondent.
Oh, good.
Honestly, send in the army, getting outrageous now, #London riots.
I mean, it probably showed that tweet to them when he applied for the job.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got Jesus Christ.
I will
Mr.
say though, that's like fucking peak newsreader. That though, innit? You know what I mean? The sort of prick who could like dispassionately report on riots in like any other country in the world, but when it's happening at home, oh, fucking hell, we better like, you know what I mean? Better release the hounds with bees in their mouth, etc.
Jesus Christ, Mr. Cameron, all caps, send in the army now, please. From some voiceover actor.
Do these people like not have sort of any remote conceptual thing of what they're saying of if we use the armed forces to police the civilian population, what it is they actually are saying, you know, and what kind of government they are actually aspiring to? Like,
Rob, these are the same people who are calling for like a peaceful no-fly zone over Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you the last one I've got here from another DJ.
Who was that guy you said a voice actor? Was it like any character we might have heard of? Was
No,
it like
I
Duke
literally don't know
Nukem?
who
Is
this
Duke
person
Nukem a
is.
melt?
The guy who did the guy who did the English dub for Triumph of the Will.
Someone
Duke
called
Nukem is a comrade. I won't have you say otherwise.
someone called Abby Roberts.
Okay.
Don't know. And the last one, another DJ, someone called Lempo, who the fuck knows, who cares. There is clearly zero political motivation. The PM needs to pull his finger out and send in the army to shoot the fuckers, but fuckers has been asterisked out.
course.
#riot
Oh, good.
cleanup.
Oh, good.
good.
My call for
yeah.
extreme
Civility
violence has
politics.
been sanitized with an asterisk in a swear word.
I like the suggestion there that like fucking, do you know what I mean? David Cameron needs to pull his finger out and send the army in to whatever his finger was in. Like, presumably a pig or some shit, you know what I mean? Just like
They're purposely there to replace the pigs. So that's kind of like where the ideal is. Like that's what the army's really for. It's kind of bad when we send them away to do wars and stuff because people generally like, well, maybe not generally. Right now, everyone seems to fucking love the idea of a war, but typically over the last like 20 years or so, that's been kind of a bad thing.
hey,
We
the
shouldn't
British
be doing
people.
it.
British people love a war so much right now that since we haven't like fucking done one with the army, everyone's just going over there themselves. You know what I mean? They've got the Baz division hitting the ground in Ukraine now.
Yeah, I mean,
The Georgia detachment of the Baz division.
Yeah, we've disparaged the idea of war by fumbling Iraq and Afghanistan, and we won't investigate what that actually means. But what we need now is a good war in order to restore faith in liberal democracy.
Hey, while you bring up the fumbling of Iraq, did you see that fucking optics cunt today saying that like,
oh yes,
I mean, that was
Train
exactly what I
is
was obliquely
great.
referencing.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
yeah,
Specifically him.
Oh, that was the Times guy, right? Who was just like, yeah, the bad thing about Iraq was that it made our political system sad or something. Like, it was
Josh
really...
Clancy, you're a fucking cunt.
It made the people like not like war, but now we've got a good war that makes people like war again. So we'll be back in Iraq like this time next year.
Phew.
And people will be happy about it this time.
So yeah, that's what the army's really for. If you're a liberal, that's that.
Well, it kind of. I mean, so put my theory hat on a second. It kind of is. I mean, the thing about liberals.
Do I get a theory hat?
You can have one if you want one, Jamie.
Jamie, yeah.
In theory, you have a theory hat. But yeah, no, realistically, the difference between liberals and people who are actually on the left is that liberals are fine with violence as long as it's out of sight and out of mind, right? And as long as there's an excuse to justify it, And this is what it basically comes down to. They're happy with human suffering and misery as long as it's not theirs and doesn't impact or cause theirs, So they're happy, they don't really think about it, and they practice the art of not thinking about it.
Yeah.
And so if the army's off doing violence to other people, then as long as it's justified, it's all good and fine. The only time it bothers them is if they can't construct a justification, therefore they are forced to feel sad and bad about it.
Yes, and hold that thought in your head.
I mean,
we're going to come back to it.
I think saying that they practice not thinking about it is being too generous. I think every liberal is a shy fascist, and they actually love the idea of our brave lads abroad bombing like a foreign country.
Again, I'm gonna ask you to just wait a little bit until we discuss a little more, and then we're going to come back, and that's
theory hats off,
going to be
please.
some of the final point.
All right.
That's it. I will tell you when. So
sitting here with my theory balaclava ready to go. Notice.
I put on my theory wizard hat and robe.
Hey, that is my aesthetic style. So I suppose.
So we've covered what the army's for and what they're supposed to be for. But what do we do with them? You respect them. You respect the troops. They died so that you'd be free to respect them. So you fucking better.
Yeah,
but they haven't died. How am I supposed to only respect the ones that are dead? Because that would make things significantly easier for me.
No, you're not. You're
supposed to do as you're fucking told, because somebody's granddad died at the Somme, so that you would have the freedom to do as you're told.
Yes,
okay, I just wanted to double check and make sure.
It's not just that though, and we'll get on to it. So Remembrance Day as a thing, right?
Remembrance Month at the minimum.
Well, no. We're back in time here when it was just Remembrance Day, because when I think back to
when was that? 1913.
It was on the 11th minute of the 11th hour of the 11th day, Jamie. That's when it was.
I mean, correct me, right? So, some of you are older than me. Correct me if I am wrong, but even when I was a cadet, so I'm talking 12, 13 years old. Right, thanks.
Yeah, you were wrong to be a cadet, but we've gone past it.
Yeah. And I was actually participating in Remembrance Day parades and stuff like that, because of course that's what they get the kids to do.
It's really just as a side note, it's really great that we celebrate remembrance, which is a sort of weird conjunction I'm not even going to go into. But the
Rob,
thing that
just
you do,
Rob, we are going to go into that.
It's just let's do the child soldiers on parade. What?
I mean, well, again, let me finish with it. So, all you did as a cadet was there would be on the Saturday of Remembrance weekend, you would go out and rattle it in for a little bit, collect some money for the Poppy Appeal, and then on Sunday you would make sure your boots were shined and everything was ironed properly, and you would go out and you would do a march from wherever you started the thing from to the cenotaph. You would stand about for a bit while the fucking last posting that played. You would march past and you would salute some guy, and then you would go home. And that was it. That's all it was. And largely, it wasn't much more than that. It was actually just this kind of vaguely fucking somber thing. There's always been people with problems with Remembrance Day, and fine, I get where they're coming from with it, but like at the same time, it was never anything. If you compare 20 years ago to like now, it's going to be vastly fucking different.
Do you know why it's changed?
Yes, we're going to cover that. So, I think the jumping off point.
I'd love to be
here,
on this podcast that's in the future. It sounds like a great podcast I'd love to listen to.
So, in 2009, I think this is the jumping off point for a couple of reasons as to when things got really fucking weird. 2009 was the year that we pulled out of Iraq. That was the end of it. The Iraq War was over. The troops were home, etc., etc. Now, during the Iraq War, there was a steady ramping up of the poor troops as a concept because, like, you remember there was all the we've badly equipped the troops and they're all dying because the shitty little Land Rovers are like fully deathly allergic to IEDs.
They need a bulletproof vest, not a fucking like referendum or some shit.
That's right. Yeah.
Also, ultimately, it was because the Ajax wasn't ready. That's why the British boys died.
So that kind of thing was slowly ramping up. I've got a little statistic here. So of them,
I remember the like fucking big hysteria about the guns didn't work in the desert or something.
They fucking didn't, by the way. They
it's
didn't
like
fucking work at home. I remember
it's
those
like,
things.
Maybe just stay out of the fucking desert then. Do you know what I mean? Like, would everyone not be happier if you just didn't fucking take your shit gun where it doesn't work and it isn't wanted? But apparently,
I tell you who wouldn't be. BAE Systems.
Yeah.
So, of the more than 183 fatalities, 138 personnel in Iraq were classified as having been killed in hostile circumstances, while the remaining 44 lost their lives as a result of illness, accidents or friendly fire, or suicide. And there were 3,598 wounded. That's from the beginning of Iraq from the beginning of the Iraq War to the end of the Iraq War. Now, we remember that no one fucking wanted that war. It was like the biggest and most protested against thing in British history. Everyone fucking hated it, basically. Even people in government at the time didn't like it. It was that fucking bad. So, that was a slow and steady ramping up. I don't know if you also remember Bryce Norton.
That was the airport where the bodies came home, and then it was like we weren't allowed to see that anymore or something. Or is this like the Wooten Bassett thing?
Yes, it is. It's Wooten Bassett. That's
okay.
Wooten
and
Bassett,
then
or now Royal Wooten Bassett, as
of
it's known,
course,
because they paraded a bunch of corpses through it. Was the town where the bodies would come off the plane and drive through on their way to wherever the fuck they take bodies that have been shot up by Iraqi soldiers. That was in the news.
Yeah, sometimes American.
Or American, yeah. That was the town where they pulled the bodies through, and it was on the news every single fucking day. Like, I honestly, of all the things that I can remember of the Iraq War, that's the thing I can remember the most because I've seen it the most often.
The thing that I really remember about the Wooten Bassett thing is there was that brief thing that like got everybody very excited was when some other dickhead like quite an extremist Muslim guy was just like, we're gonna protest in Wooten Bassett, and he said, I'm saying this to get on the news, and then everybody went and got him on the news.
Was that Andrew Chowdhury?
Andrew Chowdhury, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. It was like such a fucking obvious thing, and I'll get onto that kind of thing in a little bit as well. But that all happened and culminated in 2009 with the end of the Iraq War. It's all done. It's fine. Yeah, we're still in Afghanistan, but pretend that's not happening because that one was just because remember that one was for 9/11.
What year did that guy? I think he stood. It must have been an election year because I think he stood against Tony Blair and embarrassed him with a speech about his son who died in Iraq or something.
It must have been 2000.
Must have been 2005.
5? Yeah,
that's about right.
Yeah, it must have been 05.
Because do you think maybe like Tonty fucking decided to ramp up the remembrance and like plus one?
Do you know what? Right, can I cut in here because I don't think the real reason this is ramped up has been covered at all, or even touched on.
I'm finished.
Go on.
Harry Patch died in 2009.
That's it.
There you go. These two things culminated in pretty much the exact same time Harry Patch obviously being the last serving soldier of World War One. Ostensibly, the whole point of doing Remembrance Day was to remember people of his generation who gave their lives, etc., in the war.
He wasn't, and for record, just for listeners who don't know, because we do have some younger listeners, he wasn't just the last fighting Tommy, he was called.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he fought in the trenches, and he was an avowed pacifist who has many, many quotes.
Yeah, he was a
about
good
war
comrade,
being
yeah.
I mean,
war being sanctioned murder.
Fighting in the trenches will give you that impression, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really there's one spooky thing about it, which has always stuck with me, which is a guy died aged 111 years, 1 month, 1 week, and 1 day.
Fuck's sake.
And given that we celebrate on,
Yeah.
and I know the word celebrate here, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, etc., just a little spooky to me, frankly. But anyway.
The portents of history, etc. So, like, that he died the same year as the Iraq War ended, and that was 2009. Now, did you know that the UK used to have Veterans Day?
I'd
course
heard
you
of this,
didn't.
but I don't know the details.
Well, that's because no one fucking cared. It was started in 2006, and it lasted until 2008, when it was rebranded as Armed Forces Day in 2009.
Ah.
Yes.
I've never heard of
Now,
that
if
either.
anyone's... Have you not? Well, fuck, lucky you. Right, so Armed Forces Day was very much we will make a concerted effort to get the troops out on the streets and in parks, etc., to do, like,
keep away the
basically
riffraff.
fucking PR outreach. No, fully not. Interact with the riffraff, get them in, bring them to the recruiting tent, etc. It was very much a don't you all love the army type deal. Now, that from 2009, it took place across the UK. There was loads of places. I have been to some of these, again with the cadets, and like the more recent ones I've been to, so like maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, versus like the early ones of 2009 are quite different. They're kind of like just a kind of county fair type deal now, where it's just like a few, there's like a little parade, and then there's like some stands and stuff, and some of them are recruiting, and there's other like organisations
replacing the
around
rubber
the place
ducky,
will get involved.
replacing the rubber ducky store with
honestly,
a Stinger missile.
that kind of thing. I mean, like we set one up a while back in the cadets, and the whole thing was that we had a bouncy castle there, like dumb shit like that. That's what it's turned into, and like fair enough. And I think that's part of the backlash that was caused from the beginning of it, because the beginning of it was the army would rock up with some like small tanks and actual weapons chained to tables, and were like, "Hello,
Most
child, would you
disappointing day
like
of
to touch
David's
the
life,
rifle?" Like, it was full on, but it was hard full on recruitment. It was like, would you like to come over? Would you like to see what we do? Are you interested in this? Would you like to hold a rifle? Would you like to fucking do this, that, the next thing?
Was there a mum like clapping and cheering while the children stamped on cockroaches, or?
No, not quite to that degree, unfortunately. No, nothing as exciting as that. But it was very overt in what it was. It's less so now as a thing. But I think that's just because funding's largely been pulled from it, and like I say, civilians have kind of like muscled in with it as well, and just done, well, there's going to be a bunch of people in the park, so I'll set up a wee stall and sell some stuff there. Or
Yeah, join the army, we've got bouncy castles.
Yeah. So that,
if you think about it, getting hit by an IED is very close to just being a very adult bouncy castle.
If you think about it, what is the Ajax but?
yeah, a very hard bouncy castle that you can't escape. The Armed Forces Day thing has had an effect, I think, because you will, in like bigger towns, cities and stuff, there will be like a military parade through it. There'll be an event on in the park at the weekend where everyone's going to come out and they'll see it as in their day to day. The army is more visible now, but it's visible in a very offhand way. They're not really there doing anything, they're just present, and they're there to be displayed, so you only get that kind of like shiny idea of them, if you know what I mean. That's what that's there for, and that, I think, has affected the overall mindset a little bit, but obviously only as a kind of supplementary to what the death of Harry Patch did to Remembrance Day, which was to make it insane.
Well, I mean, it did get very like plastic over time, didn't it? Like it's all very it's completely unreal because it's
do you know what I mean? There's people on Amazon have got like fucking poppies that they made themselves to sell to fucking like dipshits from Britain First or whatever. It's far better, like, you know, rather than give you money to like, you know, the fucking whatever charity it is, the Royal British Legion or something.
Yeah.
Rather than buy a poppy from the old lady in the supermarket, like, you know what I mean? You just get one off Prime.
Get a fancy one.
Yeah, get a fancy one. That like
or
also
get a big one
has...
that you can put on the front of your car.
The Captain Tom Memorial one, ridged for your pleasure. You mean?
I mean, yeah, but I've seen some of the stuff that people will say with fucking Captain Tom on it, and
but you like, also need to get like metal silhouettes of like fucking World War One soldiers to put in your garden, and like fucking just all sorts of.
I'll tell you one of the weirdest
really,
things. Like last year, I was in the UK, and I was
Future Soldier T-shirts for the kids,
and
that's the next thing I'm going to talk about.
And like I was gonna like I was just going for a walk, and they had all these like weird like just benches for people like for pedestrians to sit on, but they were like with metal poppies, and like one of the side frames was, you know, the silhouette of the soldier, and it's like right, I'm just gonna sit here in Flanders Field and eat my sandwich like a normal person. Like, what is this supposed to do for me?
Yeah,
the sad Keanu of remembrance.
The future soldier thing, that was fucking huge. That was, I'm pretty sure it was Help for Heroes, wasn't it? Yeah. So Help for Heroes was a charity that was set up during I want to say it goes as far as back as the Iraq War, but definitely during Afghanistan anyway. And the idea was it was a troop support type charity for, you know, all the things that the army won't actually.
But how is
really
that different from
like,
the British Legion?
Yes. I think the idea was that it was set up as a charity. So, I mean, draw your own conclusions from past episodes in which we've talked about charities loosely as related by the military. But the idea was that the British Legion already kind of was at capacity with what it did. So we need another charity to step in and do more. That was kind of like ostensibly the reason for it. Now, Help for Heroes was to do with, you know, PTSD recovery, with like soldiers who'd come back and had to have limbs amputated, all that kind of stuff, which, like, okay, fair enough. But it seemed to be really susceptible to like really weird scandals and fraud cases and stuff.
No.
I know, right? There was some guy who raised like hundreds of thousands of pounds that the charity just never fucking seen. There was the Future Soldier T-shirts, which were sold on the website.
How big was that guy's garden?
No idea. Couldn't find anything about it. There was the Future Soldier T-shirts, which were, you know, tiny little child-sized T-shirts with the words "Future Soldier" written on them, which is a deeply normal thing to do.
Why would?
But again, it is a charity called Help for Heroes, so like.
So the normal
Rob,
thing
is this your brain exploding on contact with a piece of like normal British?
I mean, I get what it is, and like, I mean, it's stupid, and it's clearly just, you know, another way to displace, you know, sort of support for something that when your child grows up, you know, you fucking would rather die than have them actually join as an actual thing. But Jesus wept. What?
Yeah, I mean, the Help for Heroes stuff, I remember that from when I was in the cadets as being very much a thing that we never really like touched. It was always kind of there on the periphery of things that we did, but we never actually were involved with them directly, and that was probably from up top that was kind of given as a don't get involved with them. Now, whether or not that actually happened, I don't know, but it makes sense because of how little contact we had with them.
I think part of the problem, and the thing that I suspect is blowing Rob's mind, is how artless it is. Like, you know the urge, you know the drive it's serving. It's just who would think that is a good piece of propaganda and think that's a good idea, and it wasn't.
British people.
Well, here's the thing. Actually, it drew more controversy than I think it had success. The good stuff is like oxygen. You can't see it. You're not aware it's.
They were just ahead of the time. They did that again now, and like you'd be fucking like dragged into the street and beaten as a traitor for fucking daring to tweet about it.
I mean, potentially.
Yeah, again, all you know, different things are different, etc. It's a different time.
It's a worse time.
Yes, it always is. The far right, with Help for Heroes. Now, there was an instance where, I don't know if you remember Lee Rigby, the drummer who was attacked and killed in the street.
Oh yeah, the Beatles wrote a song about him, I think.
Oh my fucking god.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So like he was killed in what was deemed to be a terrorist attack, etc. On the street. Now, a couple of things I want to point out here. First off, was like the EDL response to this was Tommy Robinson was going to do like a march by himself and wanted to raise £5,000 for it to go from like the centre of London to Woolwich where it happened, to lay a wreath, and he wanted £5,000 to do that. And Help for Heroes, to their
How
credit,
expensive are his
fuck
fucking
off.
shoes? Exactly.
Fuck those. But yeah, Help for Heroes told him to fuck off in that regard and didn't want his money, and then the fundraiser disappeared, and I don't know what happened with the money. I didn't look into it that much. I don't really care.
Coke.
But yeah, so that was a whole thing that happened, and around about that time as well, like, protection of the army became very important. They had to be defended, and it was like couldn't possibly say bad things about them.
They're the yeeters.
No, they're sensitive little souls.
Our precious bodily
it's
fluids
bad.
are being sapped.
So that kind of brings things back to what I said to keep in mind earlier with the liberal fascist fucking bit. It is the army sits in that fascist quantum superposition of very powerful thing that should be feared, and yet also very fragile thing that could collapse at the slightest impact. It's the same way that fascists. Yeah, the enemy of the fascist. What are they? They are incredibly powerful and dangerous, yet also like snivelling,
subhuman,
useless.
And
Yeah, subhuman.
Yeah.
It's the inverse of that.
Okay.
They are very powerful, and that's a good thing, but they are also very weak, and that's a bad thing. The army.
Okay.
It's the same. It's the same, but inverted fascist superposition, and that is again like tying this back to the whole.
We are very powerful, but there are enemies in every corner, and they could come for us at any moment, kind of situation.
Yeah, and all of them could
fascist
destroy us
paranoia.
because we are actually very weak if you think about it, but don't ever think about the two at the same time. Otherwise, the superposition collapses, and only one of them is true. Like that is again tying back into the whole the long fucking ongoing thing that we still need to do like a proper episode on about how liberals are just fascists really because it's just one big fucking spectrum of bullshit. That's it there. Like that's another key fucking element of how that's true in my opinion, because the army can't be both of those things, and yet somehow it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, no lies detected.
Yeah. But like, yeah, it's just it's very fucking weird to have that kind of opinion of the military be the thing, the British thing. And like Rob, I'm gonna go to you as the only person who was fortunate enough to not be from here. What's it like on the continent with regards to the military? Do people like give a fuck like this?
I mean, I can only speak for sort of for my own country, and also not really because I haven't lived in it for like nigh on a decade now. But like the weird thing is they did Veterans Day. That's now a thing in the Netherlands as well. Like I think it's the day before Memorial Day or something. I can't remember when the fuck it is actually. Give me a sec to look this up.
What's Memorial Day?
Right, so we have two things. We have like two Memorial Days. We have like Memorial Day is on the 4th of May, and that's just an evening thing where we remember the dead of mainly World War II, but also World War One and the other wars. Essentially, that's quite solemn. That's like the minute of silence stuff.
Yeah, okay.
And then we have Liberation Day the day after, which is the 5th of May, which is when the armistice with the Germans was signed in World War II, and that's essentially the party piece. So, like, you first have the solemn memorial, and then the hooray, we're liberated thing.
Right. And on that one, like, I'll make the point, that makes sense to me for the Dutch to do that as a country which was fucking occupied during World War II, to have, like, a celebratory victory day, etc. Like, that makes a lot of sense to still be a thing now. But like we didn't really have that problem.
Yeah, and the weird thing is
here,
like,
so it's weirder that we would do something like that.
And the weird thing is that like what they started not that long ago. When the fuck was it? It was held since 2005, and you have to remember the Dutch were also in Afghanistan. So like, I think it's very much related to the same thing. Like, it was organized. It's now in June, and it's like a day of remembrance specifically for veterans. And I'm just like, I don't, it's also to do with like giving Dutch veterans respect and credit for their bravery in Afghanistan, even though the Dutch people didn't want them there either. And talk about PTSD and Dutch veterans, all that shit. But like, so far as I know, it's never really like gotten big into the public consciousness. I could be wrong. Again, I haven't lived there in a decade, so like, it could be that this is a big thing now. But I think there was always like a sort of mild level of like embarrassment that we were like, well, we have Remembrance Day, we have Liberation Day. What's this other thing for?
Yeah,
I think as well, Rob, like, because obviously English is a shared language between, like, main language of the UK and the US, and the special relationship and whatever. Like, it is well known that Americans love to shag their flag more than anybody, and it's no surprise, I don't think, that after Iraq and Afghanistan, that at least some of that bled over into British culture.
Well, and then therefore by extension to the Dutch, because the Dutch are the most English outside the English, who are the most American outside the Americans.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to do the listen to other podcasts, but like, there was an unlocked Patreon episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die on this very subject that was released just this week. Thanks again for that timing. Well done. Because I planned this from fucking before 2 days ago. Like, they cover that, and obviously Nate's on that. And Nate has obviously the American experience to kind of contrast that against the British one. But I thought it would be interesting, Rob, to get your one from a kind of more continental perspective, because
I mean, the thing that strikes
in World
me,
War II specifically are very different.
Again, this thing that strikes me specifically about the Dutch one, but also from other ones that I've seen, is it tends to be like much more like solemn and like not so like gung ho about like, fuck yeah, we're gonna do a war again, but more like, oh wait, a lot of people died, and like, in cases, a lot of people, like, that generation has passed now, but like, a lot of people can still say, like, my family, part of my family, my great uncle or whoever died in the war. It's still like, through your parents, that's still a living link.
See, part of it is, I think, that continental Europe had the war on it, and Britain just had the Blitz, which is much more removed in memory now, and I think that's pretty much it. It's the whole liberal thing of, when it's tucked away, then you can indulge about it, but when it's undeniably in your face, then, and when it's part of your living cultural memory,
you need to engage with the realities of it. Yeah.
And so Harry Patch dying is like part of that, and then separately, all the people who lived through the Blitz have all fucking gone essentially as well, more or less. So. And the ones that haven't, it's like, they're all consigned to irrelevance, essentially, and they're not soldiers. Whereas Harry Patch was unimpeachable. Harry Patch, you can't simultaneously praise the soldiers and then ignore it when they stand up and go, war sucks. And there isn't, like, a replacement for him.
Yeah.
So in many ways, that guy was, like, holding shut the seal on the, one of the signs of the apocalypse, bluntly.
Well, I mean, I do think that it is interesting that, like, because what you don't seem to be having is what you have now, is like, there's a new generation of veterans who did go to Iraq and Afghanistan, and some of them came home with very strong anti-war opinions, but it is now acceptable to put those people away as cranks. Like, they're now lefty socialist scum, even though they have the same, they have the same quote-unquote credentials, if you will.
They don't, though, because they haven't fought in trenches, which was like measurably worse than modern soldiers who are like, they're still our brave lads, but compared to like the brave lads of old, they're sort of like slightly weak and effeminate, because they're just like, they have body armor and tanks, whereas in the trench, you just like, you know what I mean? You got trench foot and then you got shot.
It's partly
So,
that,
I
and it's
think-
partly what the walls were for. Like, everyone agrees that World War One was just shit all round. Like, no one
Yeah.
thinks World War One was good. And if you
I
ask
mean,
about World
you'd
War
say
Two,
that.
everyone...
Yeah,
well,
you say that, like,
yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
like
we're not talking about the Balkans, though, so...
the thing with like, you know what I mean? The thing is, all the people who fucking like dismiss like returning soldiers today as cranks if they don't support war, they would have done exactly the same fucking thing to like Harry Patch when he, like, you know what I mean, when he came back from war.
Like,
It's
no,
just
like,
it's just that now it's like far enough removed that you can just go like, well, yeah, they came back and they were like, they said the war was terrible, but that's because that one war was terrible. But they didn't
No,
mean
think
all
there's
wars.
there's a huge structural difference here, and it's that World War One and World War Two there was mass conscription, and so everyone knew firsthand. Like, there was some family members who died or vanished or were never heard from again, or who came back traumatized. Everyone
See,
knew how terrible it was.
I don't think it's just that.
I'm not saying like people at the time would have like called like fucking people returning like dipshits for saying peace. I'm
got you.
saying the people today who were saying like, oh well, like fucking you come back from Afghanistan and you claiming it's like you've got PTSD where they didn't have PTSD in like World War One or whatever, would have like
yeah, they had shell shock.
yeah, they would have like been just as those same pricks would have been just as dismissive of, you know what I mean? The only thing
yeah.
they can get it, they can hold up World War One as like, oh, it's a bad war because there's no one alive to like fucking tell them that like, no, actually when we say war we mean all wars, not just this one.
I think the other difference is as well, like I was saying, World War One, everyone said it was shit. World War Two was like effectively as close as you're going to get to a just war. Like, what were you doing? It was to stop fascism. Don't ask any of the things that we're doing and we're up to elsewhere, but it was to stop fascism ostensibly, or at least it's framed as such. Obviously, it was actually just fucking imperialism against imperialism.
I think
But anyway,
maybe
it had that effect.
Yeah, I think maybe, David, it also has something to do with what you were saying earlier about like the inversion of the fascist supremacy. Like the army is simultaneously
Yeah.
extremely strong, but also very weak, and that essentially the veterans that come home now, that you can say, yes, they belong to the other side, which is they're not the strong, they are the incredibly weak little flowers who who essentially have failed in their mission of being strong.
That does fit to agree, I think, yeah. And also the other point is, and I hate to be the guy that brings it up again, but the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. And we've just done a big Cold War where, like, if you weren't fucking, like, rabidly on the side of just kill the commies, you were a collaborator, and you were like you loved the Soviet Union and you loved everything about it, and that mindset hasn't died with the Soviet Union, which is why we find ourselves where we are today, opinions about Russia around Ukraine, and that in itself has an effect too, where if you're not coming back for the war and saying that war was fucking brilliant, or at the very least saying I'm really glad I served my country, whatever the fuck that means, then you must be some soft fuck
or traitor,
lefty,
like, because you're destroying the comfortable stories that we've told each other.
But you repeat me, like, it's the same fucking thing as far as they're concerned. Yeah. So I mean, that's it. Long and short of this, it's very fucking weird. This country has a really strange fixation with what the army is, should be, and what they think it is. And it never really matches up. And like I say, it requires that same cognitive dissonance of fascist perception of a thing to really function when you try and fit it in a mindset.
It's proto-fascist Spartan state kind of stuff, basically. It's the slow introduction of and normalization of like a military mindset into non-military applications in everyday life.
Oh fuck!
And it hasn't become centralized yet, but it's getting there.
No, but that's a whole other fucking thing. I mean, fucking businesses love the concept of the military, and like if you look fucking like fitness is a thing, gym stuff. I mean, Alistair, you've maybe fucking clocked this at times in gyms where guys who are like ex-army or whatever will heavily fucking lean on that shit as like a way to become your personal trainer. And it's all about the military way of training your body, etc., and fucked up shit like that. Like, just give it a rest. Fucking just stop, guys. You've took the fucking uniform off. You don't need to do this anymore. But it sells. It's useful because of the environment it's being created.
Yeah, but it's self-reinforcing.
It is,
It's
yeah,
how
yeah.
you get to societies like that.
Yeah, I mean, what else is fascism but self-reinforcing, really? I mean, it's one unfortunate point of it is that it is very fucking good at that. But before we go into this whole thing, I need to try and figure out a name for this fucking theory that's not just fishhook theory, because we're adding a spectrum into it because we're just clever like that. But yeah, so let's just fucking call the episode there. Your article read that we promised earlier. Sorry about that, we ran on a bit. It happens.
As you might have noticed,
want the
this
article
episode
read,
is long already.
Yeah. If you
It's been a
want the
very
article,
cursed day.
it has been a very cursed day. We almost fucking didn't get this recorded at all. Thanks, Discord. If you want the article read, then you can get that by going to patreon.com/praxiscast, where we're going to do that article read on the next premium episode, because we don't have time for it here now. So
Exactly.
join us there. Twitch streaming is as normal Mondays and Thursdays. Twitch.tv/praxiscast for some Valheim and some Phoenix Point with Jamie and Alistair. And also check out potential more streams of Elden Ring at the weekend with James and assorted whomevers who come on to join the voice.
Whoever's about.
We're getting there.
Yeah, we are getting there.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks very much for listening. Thank you very much for listening to me fucking whittle on. This is what happens when I'm allowed to plan episodes. So if you didn't like it, at everyone to make sure I'm never allowed to write notes again, I would very much appreciate it.
The word plan is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Like,
I rest my case. Anyway, catch you later, folks.
yeah, see ya.
Cheers.
See ya. Good night.